The Mythical Island 5 in a row PvP event is about to begin. So here are the 5 best decks according to the Limitless TCG tournament data in terms of both popularity and win rate in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Now, of course, these are the 5 most heavily played decks in tournaments, so you might take an approach where you play some off-meta decks to try and counter some of these decks, but realistically, these are the decks you are going to be facing the most when you try and get your 5 streak wins. Now, before we get into today's video, please do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for the next one if you do enjoy this type of content. And if not for me, do it for my son. I mean, look at him. He's turned into a loaf of bread. Now, the first deck and the deck you are likely to face the most, simply due to the high popularity of 17.73%, is Mewtwo EX. Or Mew3 EX with the Mew variant. Now, across tournaments, this has a win rate of 50.45%. It is a solid performer and is probably the most popular deck for most players in the game, just across tournaments or just in casual PvP play. The foundation of the deck is, of course, Mewtwo EX in conjunction with Gardevoir, and Gardevoir gets Side Shadow, which can feed the Mewtwo EX or Mew with energies really quickly. The idea is that Mewtwo can do Side Drive pretty much every single turn, replenish energies, and sweep through your team. One of the new kids on the block is Gyarados EX, and this deck is really popular given how new it is. It's got a popularity of 11.41% and a win rate of close to 54%. The variation which is most played is the Greninja Druddigon variant, as on screen, which basically relies on Druddigon as your tank on field. Then you have Greninja popping chip damage down, and Gyarados can take kills with his massive rampaging Whirlpool, 140 damage. The deck, of course, relies heavily on Misty, because if you can't land your Misties into your Magikarp or Gyarados, this deck isn't too scary, but really it just depends on what you're playing. If you run something like Pikachu EX, you can generally take care of a Gyarados deck pretty comfortably, especially if they don't land their Misties. And the current best and most popular variation of Pikachu EX across tournaments is the Pikachu EX and Zebstrika variant. Now, this deck includes Blitzel and Zebstrika, as well as Pikachu EX, Zapdos EX, Dedenne, and Electabuzz. It's a rather eclectic mix of Pokemon, but Zebstrika and Electabuzz both have the ability to hit any Pokemon on the field, whether it is on the active position or on the bench. Dedenne is also in this deck, and it is a very cool card with only 10 damage done, but it does have the ability Thundershock, which can paralyze the opponent. This makes Dedenne a very good stall mechanism for games where you need to stall out to get your Pikachu down onto the field. Zapdos, of course, usually fills the tank role in this deck, but Zapdos can actually be utilized with Thunder and Hurricane to do massive damage if you can get your head rolls. Next up, we have Celebi EX and Exeggutor. Now, Celebi EX plus Serperior plus Dhelmise or any other variants has a much lower win rate. The Exeggutor EX deck is just a step above. The win rate here is close to 54%, whereas the other variants of Celebi average around a 48% win rate, so much lower. The popularity here is 4.68%, and this has increased over 1% since my video last week, so the popularity is rising and the win rate has barely dropped. In my previous video, the win rate here was close to 55%, and we're still up at 54%, so this deck is very consistent and performing very well across tournaments. Celebi EX on its own is a bit of an RNG card, which is kind of not that good unless you can get a ton of energy down, so Exeggutor EX does make this deck a lot better. And the second Exeggutor is actually really nice for when you do face things like Charizard or Gyarados. You can take them out really quickly and really easily, because Celebi has a very low HP pool and Exeggutor doesn't do enough damage to deal with those threats. Now, Charizard EX, Moltres, and Arcanine, as well as the Mew, the Fire Psychic version, is probably one of the most popular and best performing Charizard variants across tournaments. It has a popularity of 3.19% and a win rate of 49.19. Now, there are quite a few variations of this deck. There is also a very similar variant, which I think the data is a bit overlapping, which does have a 52% win rate. So I think we can say this has around a 50 to 52% win rate on average. It is a very good deck and does a lot of work. Charizard is just a really strong card when you get your head rolls with Inferno Dance or Moltres, and it's pretty hard to stop, just like Mewtwo. Now, honorable mentions to a few more decks here. The Pikachu Raichu variant is a very good deck. It is fairly consistent. It's just not that popular with 3.26%. Granted, it is actually more popular than Charizard, but I didn't want to include 2 Pikachu EX decks, but has a win rate of 52.26% and is a very fun alternative to Pikachu Zebstrika. Scolipede Weezing is also quite popular with 3.21%, but it's not quite as consistent. 46.42% win rate across tournaments. It does do very well against Celebi EX, but it does struggle against some of those bigger boys like Charizard and Gyarados, if they can't quite do enough, or if you do run into things like Druddigon is a pretty big issue for the Scolipede Weezing deck, in my opinion. Now, it's got a much lower popularity, but I've included Starmie Articuno just because its win rate is just so good, and it's just one of the staples of the meta and has been for a long time. It's not that played anymore, but I still think it's just one of the decks which is just really good because Starmie is just a great card and it's just so damn strong. Next, we have Golem Druddigon, which isn't quite as consistent. I probably wouldn't recommend running this for your 5 streak, but hey, it could get the job done. You never know, you could get lucky. With a win rate of around 45%, it's not anywhere near as consistent as the other decks we've shown. It doesn't have any EXs, just like Scolipede Weezing, and coincidentally, they both have 2 of the lowest win rates here, so maybe EXs are kind of the way to go in terms of what you run, but this deck is good, but it does fall apart against some decks as well if you can't make use of Hitmonlee. Now, last up would be my preference for a fighting deck, and that is Aerodactyl EX. So that runs the newest Mankey and newest Primeape, who are quite good. You could also substitute these for the promo Mankey and the base genetic Apex Primeape. They work really, really well. It runs the 2 Hitmonlees, it runs Aerodactyl and Marshadow, and it's a pretty damn strong deck. It has a win rate of 52%. It does perform well in tournaments, and its popularity is around 2.5%. So you probably will face this a little bit, but I think on average, you're probably going to see some of those more popular decks in your endeavor to get your 5 wins. Now, this was just a snapshot of some of the best performing and most played decks in the meta currently across tournaments, and I generally find that that is a reflection of the wider community, and these decks are the ones I tend to face the most when I'm doing casual PvP in-game. I would expect that you guys will be facing these decks a lot. Things like Pidgeot didn't make an appearance, some of the aggression decks, a Blaine deck, they're great decks, but they're not things which are currently dominating tournament formats. But they might be decks which dominate the 5 streak PvP event for you because they're different to the meta. But I know personally, when I do tend to look around forums and look at the community, people generally say they drop back and just run Pikachu EX or run Starmie EX and they get their 5 wins that way. They're very good decks, they're very fast, they're very consistent. If you run a strong deck, you've got a very good chance of getting your 5 wins. Eventually, it might not be straight away, but if you do keep at it, like just keep your head up, keep going for it, and you probably will get there. Me personally, I'm probably going to run an Arcanine aggression deck with Arcanine EX, Moltres EX, and Magma. I think that it is just really good at destroying your opponent before they can get set up. I think the Blaine deck is a good alternative as well. I think any decks which go hard and fast are just really good. But that is going to be the video, guys. So if you did enjoy this video and you found it helpful at all, please do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below if you have any suggestions or any alternatives that you think you're going to run. I'd love to see your deck ideas. But until next time, thank you guys for watching. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from the doggo, and take care of yourselves.